Hi everybody and welcome to this video which goes through evaluating data in psychology. So in this video I'm going to be recapping the main factors that we need to consider when we are evaluating our data and whether we need to repeat our experiments or investigations and whether we can actually make conclusions or draw conclusions from the data that we have collected. So this is part of the science inquiry skills that you need to know for the subject. So let's get into it. So, we need to consider the following elements to determine if our experiment or investigation was conducted as appropriately as possible. So we need to look at the validity of our results, the reliability of our results, the representativeness of our sample, and of course the sample size itself, whether it was big enough or not. So let's go into these in a bit more detail. Okay, so it's important that participants represent the whole population in question. So we need to make sure, in other words, the sample that we use in our experiment or investigations is representative of the target population that we are looking at. So in this particular example here, I'm looking at society, that's my population, but I've got two samples here. So the first one is using all female participants between 20 and 40 years of age, or using both genders equally aged between 18 to 75. So which one is going to be more representative of the population of society? Obviously, it's number two, the second one. If I use number one, it's going to severely limit the representativeness of society. So as we can see, there are no male participants, which is obviously a female bias, and there's a very narrow age range here, so between 20 and 40 years of age. And because migration has been around for quite a long time, we would need younger participants and also older participants to get a variety of responses and make sure that it represents the population in question and their attitudes. So it would be far better to use both genders equally, aged between 18 to 75. So we've got obviously an equal gender ratio and we've got much more of an age range to make the results more representative. Now, depending on obviously what we're investigating will determine what the population is. So in class, I gave you the example that if I wanted to get, year 11 attitudes towards formal next year, obviously I would need to make sure that the sample that I use to gather data represents the whole year 11 population, or my population in question, which is the year 11 cohort. So we need to make sure that the sample we use represents the population in question. Okay, as an extension of that, it's also important to consider whether the sample size is big enough to draw conclusions from. So, is 30 participants enough to measure society's attitudes towards migration? Absolutely not, okay? The sample size is far too small. So I would need to increase the sample size and do the experiment several times, or the investigation several times, in order for it to become not only more representative, but obviously we need to increase the actual sample size so we can make more conclusions, all right? So 30 participants is not enough of a sample size to draw conclusions. Okay, let's move on to validity. So validity refers to whether a test accurately measures what it has claimed to measure. So another word for validity is accuracy. So, for example, if I was to measure time, reaction time, with a faulty stopwatch, it's going to have low validity. It's going to have low accuracy because I'm not measuring it properly, all right? It's a faulty stopwatch, so my measurements are not going to be accurate. So if our results are high in validity or high in accuracy, we can draw conclusions from them. Now, another term that we've talked about is external validity. So this is when the results achieved in a controlled environment can also be applied to a real-life scenario. So in other words, the results that we get in a lab, we also would get in the real world. If that's the case, we've got high external validity, so external to the lab in the real world. Now, the main issues or the main sort of killers of validity, what reduces them greatly, are extraneous variables. So we've talked about that in a previous video. So extra variables that have the potential to replace our IV or have a negative effect on our dependent variable. So extraneous variables really can reduce our validity, which is what we don't want. And also the researcher making impossible conclusions. So based on a test that was taken, making impossible conclusions about that data. That's a real big issue. So the validity, just to summarize, is how accurately our results were measured and how accurately our results are. Now, reliability is whether the results can be consistently achieved. So in other words, the consistency of the results. So another word for reliability is consistency. If you have a car that is reliable, it's going to perform the same way, or very similarly, every time you use it. It's the same kind of deal with reliability in psychology. Are we going to get consistent or similar results each time we do the experiment or investigation? So, the main things that reduce the reliability of our data are inconsistencies in the repeated experiment. So if I did my experiment on a Monday, but then the next time I did it on the Wednesday, I changed it up a bit and I changed the instructions, or I did it at a different time of day, of course I'm going to get different results. So my consistency or my reliability is going to reduce, which is bad. Obviously, using different participants, no two people are the same. So because of that, often using different participants in different sample groups, it's going to inevitably cause different results. Okay, so there's going to be inconsistencies in the repeated trials and we're going to get different results, especially when we do observational and qualitative designs. And of course, the conditions during the data collection, if I don't keep those consistent or the same or similar, we're going to get different results. So if I use different heart rate machines each time, or I do it again at a different time of day, we're going to get different results. These are extraneous variables that are going to stop our results being consistent. So a general rule in psychology is a measure can be reliable without being valid, but a measure cannot be valid unless it's reliable. So what that means is that we can get consistent results, but consistently wrong results. Okay guys, so that summarizes the main factors we need to consider when evaluating our data. So representativeness, make sure that our sample represents the population. Is our sample size big enough? We always want big sample sizes. The bigger the sample size, the more likely it is it's going to represent the population. Validity, are we accurately measuring our results, or are our results as accurate as they could be? And reliability, are our results going to be consistent? So are we going to get the same or similar results each time we do the experiment itself? Okay guys, I hope you found this video useful. Happy revising. Any questions, you know what to do. Let me know. Bye.